Welcome everyone. Our Biosphere Reserve Champions webinar will be starting at 4 p.m. Please stay tuned. Good evening everyone. Let's start our today's session. This session is being recorded for learning and outreach purposes with schools from all over the country participating online. A very warm welcome to everyone joining us once again for the final session of the Biosphere Reserve Champions webinar series. I am Akanksha, your host for today, and I am delighted to have you with us as we conclude this enriching and inspiring journey together. Many of you have been with us over the past two sessions and are familiar with the BRC journey. But for anyone joining us for the first time today, or if you just need a quick refresher, let us take a brief look at what the Biosphere Reserve Champion program is all about. After all, a quick recap never hurts before we wrap up things. Biosphere Reserve Champions is a school program for students of standard 6 to 12 that builds scientific understanding of climate change, biodiversity, and sustainability. Students will explore real-world environmental challenges, raise community awareness, and propose creative solutions aligned with the SDGs. Before we go into today's session, let us take a quick final glance at what the Biosphere Reserve Champions program stands for. This program is organized by USO in partnership with UNESCO. Let me take you to what the USO is. This year we celebrate 75 years of our journey. USO proudly carries two logos, our original logo and a special anniversary edition, marking decades of learning, leadership, and lasting impact. United Schools Organization of India is a registered society established in 1951. Registered under the Indian Societies Registration Act 21, it is our mandate to advance the social, cultural, and moral standard of schools in India to global levels by providing schools access to extracurricular tests, seminars, conferences, competitions, campaigns, and programs on a national platform. It is our vision to create a future where every school in our nation has access to a vibrant and enriching extracurricular ecosystem that fosters individual talents, instill values, and empower educators and students to excel academically and as responsible global citizens. Now that we have revisited USO, let us shift to our focus to our valued partner UNESCO, whose global vision and continued support have made this entire BRC journey impactful and inspiring. UNESCO is the United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization. It seeks to build peace through international cooperation in education, the sciences, and culture. UNESCO's programs contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals defined in Agenda 2030, adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2015. As we continue, let us take a look at the Sustainable Development Goals, that is SDGs, that form the backbone of the Biosphere Reserve Champions initiative. This program places special focus on SDG 6, SDG 11, SDG 12, SDG 13, and SDG 15. SDG 6, that is clean water and sanitation, ensures access to safe water and sanitation for all, promoting hygiene, health, and sustainable water use. Clean water is a basic right, essential for life, dignity, and a healthy future. SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, aims to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable for all. It focuses on better housing, transport, and planning to ensure a better quality of life and a greener future. SDG 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, promotes sustainable use of resources by encouraging responsible consumption and production patterns. It calls for reducing waste, rethinking how we use materials, and protecting the planet for future generations. SDG 13, that is Climate Action, urges immediate action to combat climate change and its impacts. It focuses on building resilience, reducing emissions, and protecting our planet through global cooperation. SDG 15, Life on Land, focuses on protecting, restoring, and promoting sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems. It aims to combat deforestation, halt biodiversity loss, and ensure a healthy planet for all living beings. Through these, students are encouraged to connect local action with global impact. To make the learning journey more impactful, the Biosphere Reserve Champion program is thoughtfully structured into two distinct phases. Each phase is crafted to strengthen awareness, spark curiosity, and inspire students to take thoughtful steps towards sustainability. Phase 1 focuses on creativity and expression, a space where students explore biosphere reserves and express their understanding of nature and sustainability into imaginative forms of expression. As part of Phase 1, a soft copy of UNESCO's For the Phase 1, Phase 1, students need to participate in the webinar series that we have launched on Tuesday. And on Thursday, that is today, is the third webinar series. Through a series of 3 webinars led by UNESCO officials, students will learn about UNESCO and Biosphere Reserves, the significance of Biosphere Reserves in India, ecosystems, environment, pollution, and how it is connected to each of us. As part of their journey as Biosphere Reserve Champions, students have been engaging in a series of 3 informative webinars led by experts from UNESCO. These sessions have explored what UNESCO stands for, the role of biosphere reserves in India, the importance of ecosystems, environmental challenges like pollution, and how all this connects to our daily lives. In the past 2 days, we have had inspiring sessions. Day 1 with Dr. Benobor, Chief of the Natural Science Unit at UNESCO, who shared insights into UNESCO's mission and the importance of biosphere reserves. And yesterday's session, led by Mr. Bharat Singh, Director at the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, focused on India and biosphere reserves, helping us understand their national relevance and impact. With that, let us begin our third and final webinar in the series. To start today's session, it is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Neena Jain Ma'am, Secretary General of the United Schools Organization of India, to share her thoughts for our final webinar.
Thank you, Akanksha ma'am, and good evening to everyone. I think you all must be looking forward to the end of our webinar series. And so today, it is the last webinar in our series. The topic for today's session is exploring biosphere reserves and wildlife conservation. I think yesterday there were a lot of questions with respect to the type of animals and how wildlife, what type of wildlife there exists and so on and so forth. So I think this is a very good segue after yesterday's session. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Ms. Brinda Kashyap, who in fact is the main speaker of today's event. Due to conflicting schedules, we do have her recorded presentation, which is wonderful. So I would, right after I introduce her, we will step right into her presentation. But Brinda Kashyap, and a remarkable young woman at that, she is a UNESCO MAB Young Scientist Fellow. And MAB, I hope you all remember from yesterday, stands for Man and Biosphere Program, that is UNESCO's MAB program. So Ms. Brinda Kashyap is working on rhino conservation and socio-ecological research at the Manas National Park in Assam. So I think you all remember yesterday when we went through the map and we identified where Manas National Park was. And if you recall, Manas has not been yet designated by UNESCO, but it is a site that has been identified by India as a potential biosphere reserve. So going back to Ms. Brinda's resume and her credentials, she has a background in geography and a master's in geoinformatics, and she specializes in GIS, remote sensing, and spatial modeling for biodiversity and ecosystem management. Ms. Brinda has contributed to key projects with WWF, that is the World Wide Fund, IIT Bombay, and IUCN, focusing on habitat suitability, wetland monitoring, and transboundary nature-based solutions across India and South Asia. Her work bridges geospatial science, traditional knowledge, and policy to support evidence-based conservation and sustainable landscape management. So, as I mentioned a minute ago, due to conflicting schedules, Ms. Brinda could not join us in person, but she has made great effort to put together a fabulous presentation, and she has video recorded it. So I'm sure that it is almost equivalent, although we miss her presence, her physical presence, but it's almost equivalent to having her with us for the webinar. So can I request the team to please.
Hi everyone, I'm Brinda, and today I am presenting on a topic called Exploring Biosphere Reserves and Wildlife Conservation. Before starting, I would like to say that thank you for taking out time to attend this session. So, a brief overview on what I do. Well, I work in the domain of environmental conservation, which simply means I work to protect nature, wildlife, and ecosystems. But instead of wearing a lab coat, I mostly work with maps, satellites, and sometimes very muddy field boats. And given the line, I'm engaged in, I spend a lot of time out in the field. Not the kind with crops, but places like national parks, river basins, and wetlands, mainly studying the nexus of how land, water, and species interact. And one of the most special places I work in is the Manas National Park, which is located in Assam at the border of India and Bhutan. It is not just a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a biosphere reserve, but also a tiger reserve. And it is home to animals like elephants, hornbills, golden langurs, tigers, and my personal favorite, the greater one-horned rhinoceros, about whom we will be talking a bit on details today in this presentation. So today we will go on a little journey together. And I promise that it is not a boring lecture. I actually do hope that it is pretty insightful to you guys and you guys take away something from this presentation today. Here I mainly plan on sharing stories or insights from the field, show you guys or talk about how technologies like satellites can be used to study habitats, talk about why I'm actually engaged in rhino conservation and why rhino matters, and how even you can get involved in a career path where the overall goal is saving the planet. So, whether you are someone who loves animals, enjoys maps, cares about the environment, or just wants to know what it's like working in the wild, there's something in here for you. So get comfortable, keep an open mind, and let's explore what it really means to care for nature and people together. We will start with the first slide on what is a biosphere reserve. Here, let's imagine your school has a nature lab, an eco park, and a village, all in one big space. That's sort of what a biosphere reserve is, but on a much, much larger scale. So a biosphere reserve is not just a protected forest or a national park. It is actually a place where the wild and the human worlds are woven together thoughtfully. And it is also recognized by UNESCO, which means it is part of a global family of amazing places around the world. So we briefly understood what is a biosphere reserve in a very simple words. But now let's also talk about what makes biosphere reserve special. It is the fact that they aren't designed to shut people out of nature, actually. They are mainly built on the idea that people can live with nature and not fight it. And to make that work, each biosphere reserve has 3 zones, as you can see pictorially on the right side of the screen. And these zones are core zone, buffer zone, and transitional zone. So first, we will talk about core zone. A core zone is like nature's quiet room, actually. No humans, no farming, basically no anthropogenic activities here happening. Just wildlife, forest, river, and pure wilderness. Next is the buffer zone. It is where learning happens. So think about research being done, ecotourism happening, field education being carried out, scientists doing the experiments. forest guards monitoring the species and as well as patrolling the landscape, and students also who comes for nature camps in the area. Everything happens here in the buffer zone. And next comes the transition zone. It is where the people live and work, but they do it in a very sustainable manner. That is, for example, by using solar lights, growing local crops, protecting water, and passing on the traditional knowledge. So overall, I would say that Biosphere Reserve is like a giant classroom. But here, the lessons don't come from textbooks. It comes from the trees, the birds, and the conversations of the people living in or near these areas. And to give you an example of in this regards, is that in one biosphere reserves I visited, I saw school kids planting samples in the morning, tourists on bicycles in buffer zones in the noon, and researchers setting up camera traps to track clouded leopards, all in the same day. And that's what balance looks like. And if we come to the context of our country, India, we are lucky to have 18 biosphere reserves, and 12 of them are internationally recognized. That is, from the salty, muddy Sundarbans, where the tigers swim, to the colorful coral reefs in the Gulf of Mannar, to the snow-covered peaks of Kanchenjunga. Each one is like a different world with different narratives altogether. And for me, personally, I'm very humbled and grateful to have been able to work in two of the biosphere reserves of India. The first one being Kaziranga National Park and Biosphere Reserve, where I first fell in love with rhino conservation while mapping their habitats, where I first learned that it is never enough to just spatially map them using satellite images, do remote study, remote research, and be done. It's so important to go to the landscape, experience it firsthand how rhino conservation was impacting the livelihoods of the people, why it is important to them, and see actually why Kaziranga is so ideal for the rhinos in the landscape. So it was very insightful for me and a very key learning experience and my stepping stone towards the journey of being engaged in the field of conservation science in general. And this work of mine was or is the basis upon which I have built upon my current UNESCO maybe Young Scientist Fellowship work in the Manas National Park, where I'm trying to blend science, local voices, and policies to protect and contribute towards biodiversity conservation. So, like, if you can guess by now, these aren't just forest patches on a map. The biosphere reserves are always landscapes full of memory, culture, and life. So they are basically living landscapes. And in every landscape you visit, you will always find a story of survival, of community, and of learning how to live gently on Earth. So the next time you hear the word biosphere, don't think of forest, think of harmony, which actually talks about the entire example and explanation of what biosphere reserve is actually. So as we talked about in biosphere reserves in general, let's talk about what I am actually doing in Manas with my research in this context. Well, I mainly study rhinos, but not just where they are now, also where they might be in the future. So a present and future context scenario mapping. But before we talk a bit technically about what I'm doing, let's start a bit of an history of the Manas Biosphere Reserve landscape. Well, Manas was once a vibrant home of rhinos, but in the 1980s and 90s, civil unrest and poaching wiped them out completely. So by 2003, Manas had lost its UNESCO World Heritage status and was listed in danger. Then came the turning point when our Indian government stepped in and bought the plan of Indian Rhino Vision 2020 plan in 2005. And from 2008 onwards, rhinos from Kaziranga and Bobitara were relocated to Manas. And these rhinos were kept in enclosed bomas for 6 to 12 months to acclimatize. And one of them became the first translocated rhino to give birth in the wild in 2011. So their return wasn't just symbolic. And when this was happening, it's also a huge contribution to the people living in the near landscape because they increased protection and communities started to patrol the region to help reduce poaching in the landscape to protect the species. Hence, Manas regained its UNESCO status in 2011. And today, the park has over 40 wild rhinos, including calves born in Manas. So it is basically a true conservation success story, and it is actually a privilege to be able to contribute in the journey of Manas being a true conservation success story. So a bit briefly on what I do technically with my geospatial expertise is that I create rhino-friendless maps using Maxent, an open source tool that predicts where rhinos are most likely to live, or preferred living areas can be mapped based on data like rainfall, terrain, vegetation, land use change analysis, etc. And then I merge this with satellite maps and on-ground sightings of rhino dung, the vellos, their tracks, to build a real-time picture. And in the Manas landscape, rhinos also face habitat threats which are beyond poaching. Manas has a huge issue of invasive species, invasive weeds like Siam weed choking up the grasslands. So with the grants, the landscape receives 90% of the target area were restored in the key plot regions by many CSOs and government working on it tediously to restore the areas, which is an extensive work which is actually currently going on in Manas as well. And it's that I just don't use only maps to back what I'm doing. I know that we all know that maps are powerful, but stories matter too. So I did spend some time in the villages near the park, especially with women who often notice subtle changes. And one of them actually told me that if the river dries early, elephants come closer. And that single insight from her was more valuable than just remotely doing data collection for 3 days or 4 days. Because when I actually looked into it specially, and I could see how correct she was. The rivers and the water areas were indeed drying up early in some areas in the landscape, especially the drier months. So this is why I always believe actually that conservation is more about listening and combining science with lived experiences. It is so important. And here the bigger picture is that because rhinos aren't just some big animal, they're actually ecosystem engineers. So by saving rhinos, we actually contribute in saving the entire landscape. And it takes the teamwork of scientists, forest officials, local communities, NGOs, and other CSOs working together to keep rhinos and the ecosystem safe. So next, we will be talking in more details about why we should protect rhinos. But you did get the gist of it just now in the previous slide too. So here, let me reintroduce you to one of my favorite species, which is the greater one-horned rhinoceros. And rhinos have actually been around for millions of years. And yet, just a century ago, they were almost extinct. And in the early 1900s, fewer than 200 rhinos were left in India. And you may think why? Well, it's because hunting, poaching, and habitat loss. But here's the incredible part. Today, there are more than 4,000 one-horned rhinos in India and Nepal, which is something we should all be proud of. And you might think, how did that happen? It happened through protection, community support, people understanding conservation, the importance of conservation, basically conservation education being advocated to multi-generational people, and programs like Indian Rhino Vision 2020 of our country. This very vision that helped reintroduce rhinos to Manas in the park that I work in. And as we already stated, they're ecosystem engineers, and saving them means saving the web of life around them. But rhinos are still not really not anymore in threat or something like that, because they still face risk, especially from climate change. Now with stronger floods, hotter summers. So my research tries to map a few key questions like, where will rhinos still be safe on the ground in the next 20 or 10 years ahead, actually? And how human and rhinos avoid conflict? It is not easy, but every time I see a rhino dung in the forest, I smile. It means they're still here, they're still present, and they're still thriving in the same ecosystem that we are also part of. Well, and until now, we talked with very specification of biosphere reserves, then rhino species, conserving them. So let's take a step back and a moment to zoom out and try to understand why conservation really matters. Like, why are we really talking about rhinos, biosphere zones, and satellite maps? Why does it matter to you, me, or any of us? It's because conservation isn't just about animals. It is about us, our water, our air, our climate, and our safety. So let me show you, or tell you actually, what I mean with some everyday examples. So imagine if one day bees disappear, our crops won't grow. They are tiny, but they pollinate most of the fruits and vegetables we eat. And another example can be, if we lose our forest, we lose rain, as trees bring water back to the land. And the last, but one of the most relatable example can be, if wetlands vanish, floods hit harder, like the issue which we are having in many cities of India now, and it's almost happening every monsoon season. So nature isn't about something that's out there. It's totally woven into our lives. Every sip of water, every breath of air, every bit of food depends on it. So, like, we can take an example again of what I saw in the field near the village in the Manas National Park. It was actually a few years ago, not during this time frame when I'm working, when I had a personal digital landscape. We actually heard about this story or this thing happening that farmers there used to burn crops, stubble after harvest. It was fast, but it ruined the soil. In some areas, crop began to fail and erosion became a real issue. And then, with the support from the forest department and NGOs, they switched to composting and crop rotation. And within 2 years, their soil have actually improved. Yields have increased, and they there is a reduction of in the trend of losing topsoil to wind and rain. That is conservation, not as a rule or punishment, but as a shared solution between people and nature. And the other time, actually, this was when I was in the field, I met an elderly person from a nearby village, and he said, "The forest does not sound the same anymore." He didn't use any technical terms, but he described what we call ecological change. Fewer birds, warmer days, warmer air, shorter winters, and how his memory of nature matched our satellite records of it and field data. This is the power of traditional knowledge. And when we combine it with modern science, we get the clearest, strongest picture. And now, some people think conservation means fewer jobs or development delays. But actually, it creates so many paths of, if, for example, ecotourism, forest and wildlife management, nature education and researchers, environmental art, writing, filmmaking. And I have actually seen so many young people lead bird walks, start eco enterprises, and become researchers, all because nature sparked something in them. So, and in this context, let's not forget the quiet gifts. Have you ever watched a cloud drifts over the hills, or heard birds song before sunrise, or felt calm just by sitting by the river? That's nature reminding us of who we are and what matters. So when we protect forests, rivers, and wildlife, we are not doing charity. We are taking care of our home, for ourselves, for each other, and for those who comes after us. So let's also now talk about in this slide about a really powerful idea of conservation, which is flagship species. Now, what's that? You will think. A flagship species is an animal that becomes the face of conservation, a symbol that represents much more than just itself. It actually helps draw attention, funding, support, and emotional connection. Actually, think of them as mascots of the future. Like when we talk about saving tigers, rhinos, or elephants, it's not just about the animal, it's about protecting everything around them, like forests, rivers, trees, soils, ecosystem, people, everything. And India has led some of the most ambitious flagship species projects in the world. So let me tell you about the three of them in a bit of details. First, we will start is by Project Tiger, 1973. It was launched over 50 years ago, and Project Tiger was a response to a serious crisis of Indian tigers' population being plummeted. We were losing our national animal, So the government decided to step in, creating dedicated tiger reserves, banning hunting, and involving forest departments in active protection. So today, India is home to over 70% of the world's tigers and more than 3,000 individuals in the wild. But Project Tiger did more than just save tigers. It protected the forests they lived in, helped improve law enforcement, brought in ecotourism, and created local employment as well. It also encouraged the use of technology like camera traps, radio collars, drone surveys, which we still use in wildlife studies today, and an integral part of it. Next is Project Elephant 1992. Now let's move to a gentle giant, the elephant. This project was launched with a focus not just on protecting elephants, but also to make the landscape level movements they make and protect them actually. Not only just the elephant, but also protecting the landscape as well in this regards. Because you see, elephants don't really stay in one place. They migrate across long corridors between forests. These routes are often blocked by roads, railways, or settlements. So Project Tigers mainly works on securing elephant corridors, reducing human-elephant conflict, and helping local communities coexist safely. It also supports rescue centers for orphaned or injured elephant and awareness programs in conflict-prone areas. It is a powerful example of how conservation must go hand in hand with people's safety and well-being. And last but not the least, and the most talked one in the presentation also, is the Indian Rhino Vision 2020. And this is also one's which is closest to my heart because it connects directly to my current research. So this vision actually had a very bold goal to increase Assam's wild rhino population actually to 3,000 by the year 2020 and spread them across at least 7 protected areas. It involved translocating rhinos from high-density areas to new homes, training forest guards, strengthening anti-poaching measures, also monitoring rhinos through patrols and satellites. So today, Manas has a growing population of rhinos again, thanks to this vision. And my job is to figure out where rhinos feel the safest, based on the habitat, water, vegetation, and the human factors. It's like giving the rhino a second chance at home. So these 3 programs show us that when you protect a flagship species, you don't just save one animal, you save forest, grasslands, birds, insects, rivers, and the livelihoods of local communities too. That's why these species are also called umbrella species, under which everything that comes under their umbrella benefits from the protection. And beyond just science here, there is also something emotional here. In Assam, the rhinos isn't just any animal. It's part of festivals, stories, and even everyday language. I met kids who draw rhinos in the notebooks, grandparents who remember when rhino came close to the village areas, people who feel pride when they see a rhino safe in the wild. And so for me, conservation is, as I said, isn't only about maps, models, or field data. It is really about the culture, emotion, and legacy. And the flagship species help us tie it all together beautifully. So before we end the presentation, let's also talk about conservation career scenarios. And here, let me share a bit of my story. And then maybe you can think and have a guidance on how to begin yours. I always loved maps growing up, actually, a lot. I would stare at the atlases, wondering what those green patches and blue rivers really look like in real life. That curiosity led me study geography and later geoinformatics in my master's, using which basically means using satellites and spatial tools to study Earth. And I have worked with WLVF India in Kaziranga, as I said. Next, post masters, immediately I was interning in IIT Bombay on wetland health monitoring data dashboards. And also currently also on the side, in addition to my UNESCO work, I am also part of the IUCN Youth for Meghna project under the bridge GBM, where we are working on transboundary river conservation in the Meghna river basin landscape with a transboundary theme of India and Bangladesh. And now I am a UNESCO and Beyond scientist doing fieldwork in Manas. So that was just a chronological explanation of my journey of conservation and also looking at climate buffers from wetlands, transboundary landscape study from IUCN, and also again with UNESCO. So it is a bit of a journey. If you can think about it, and everyone, I believe, everyone has their own unique journey, and we always learn, keep on learning as one step as we go ahead to the next one. And here's what I also wanted to remember, that you don't have to be a scientist to help nature. You can be a storyteller, a photographer, an educator, farmer, coder, researcher, you name it. Everybody can contribute in this conservation journey through their own lenses. It's actually your call. How do you see yourself contributing? And for an example, we can start today also by joining a school eco club, picking up plastics from your surroundings, drawing your favorite animal, learning the names of birds in your areas, even just talking about nature matters. So conservation isn't about just being about being perfect. It's about showing up with curiosity, compassion, and care mainly. That is the most important thing. So now we have reached the end of this journey together for today. And I want to thank you for listening, for being curious and present. And as today we spoke about rhinos, satellites, biosphere reserves, fieldwork, community voices. But more than that, we spoke about hope. Every forest, every wetland, every animal needs someone who cares. And sometimes it starts with a school talk like this. So, and if you would like to connect, ask questions, or share something, feel free to scan the QR code or email me. I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts. And maybe years from now, one of you or few of you will be standing in the forest looking at animal tracks or habitats. Or maybe also planting trees with local community or coming up with their own initiatives to contribute and conserve our planet. So until then, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep learning. Nature needs people like you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brinda Kashyap ma'am, for the insightful and engaging presentation. Your words brought alive the world of biosphere reserves and wildlife conservation in such a meaningful way. Though it was a recorded session, the clarity, passion, and depth of knowledge truly resonated with everyone watching. We are grateful for the effort and thought you put into this session. So let us, shall we take the question and answer? Can we take the question answers now?
Yes, absolutely. So before I take the questions, I just want to clarify. I believe at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that Manas, about Manas, which is in Assam, was not a biosphere reserve site, but I just want to correct myself and say that it was. Apologize, got confused with the ones that India had identified and UNESCO had designated. And Ms. Brinda Kashyap has in fact been at the Manas site where she has done Biosphere Reserve, where she has done a lot of research. So in terms of questions, we have got two questions, which is one of them is how many species of rhinos are there in the whole world? And I will take this question in the absence of Ms. Brinda. So according to WWF, there are 5 species of rhinos worldwide. So rhinos are typically found in Asia and Africa. So in Africa, there are 2 types of the rhino species, which is the black and the white rhino. And the remaining 3 are found in Asia, of which there is the one-horned rhino, which Ms. Brinda Kashyap mentioned. Then there is the Sumatran and the Javan rhinos. So all in all, just to answer your question, there are 5 species of rhinos worldwide. The other question that we got was, what is the importance of rhinos in the ecosystem? See, all in animals and that are found naturally or in nature have something to contribute. It might be, we might not perceive their importance or what they exactly do, but each living being has a space in nature. As far as the rhinos are concerned, rhinos, they graze meaning they eat the grass. And since they eat a large amount of the grass, it controls the population. If there's a large bush, it sort of, when they graze, it becomes less. So they help in controlling, those bushes that might be overgrown. Also keep in mind that regardless of what animals there are in rhinos, especially when they move from one part to another part of the forest or in the core area, as the case may be, they help disperse seeds which are of their of different plants. So they help in promoting that green cover, or they help in promoting plant diversity. Sometimes it's highly likely that a plant might have might be dying and might have some seeds which is found in the soil. When the rhino moves from one area to the other, maybe the other area that they have moved to is more conducive for that seed. And so maybe that seed will go to grow up to be a plant in the new area. The other is rhinos. I'm trying to go back to my school lesson, so please give me a minute. I tried to find the answers for you so that you know, but I'm trying to recollect what my teachers, and I had some fabulous teachers in school, what they taught us. But these are, the primary reasons why rhinos are important in our ecosystem. So I believe those are the only 2 questions that we got. If there are any other questions that the teachers can collate from the students, we are happy to get them answered by Ms. Brinda, who is actually doing research on the biosphere reserves, as she just mentioned. Once again, we'd like to thank Ms. Brinda Kashyap for making an effort in recording her entire presentation so that she can share her knowledge with all of us. So that's highly commendable. And Akanksha ma'am, can we go to the next step?
Ji ma'am. Okay, so everyone, before we wrap up, here is what you can expect next. Today's session, after this session, that is Thursday, July 31, we will be sharing the recording links to all the 3 webinars with you. So if you have missed anything or would like to revisit a session, you will have full access. And tomorrow, that is Friday, August 1st, we will be sending a soft copy of UNESCO's booklet, that is Pockets of Hope, guidelines for the community cleanup drive, and guidelines for the awareness campaign. Also, there will be 2 reports. One is for the list of participation students and teachers list, and report after you have finished your community cleanup drive and awareness camp, you need to fill up that. So, and these all 5 attachments we will send you tomorrow morning with an email. And the next step for schools, what schools need to do the next is conduct a community cleanup drive, organize an awareness campaign in school, submit a list of participating students and teachers. So these 2 are the next steps for USO and for the school also. We both have to do something or the other together. Thank you so much. So this is it for today's session. And with that, we wrap up the Biosphere Reserve Champions webinar series. A heartfelt thank you to each and every student, teacher, and school who joined us over the past 3 days. Your presence, enthusiasm, and curiosity truly made this series impactful and inspiring. To our expert speakers and partners at UNESCO, thank you for sharing your time, knowledge, and passion with us. Your insights have sparked awareness and a deeper sense of responsibility among our young champions. As we move forward with the activities from classroom discussions to community cleanup drives, we hope each one of you carries forward the message of conservation, sustainability, and positive action. So let's continue this journey together, not just as students and educators, but as change makers of the future. So thank you once again for being part of this incredible learning journey and the experience we have made with the UNESCO and these webinars together. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all.